Welcome to literary and jury charge practice. We'll start with some jury charge, and the subject of this jury charge is malpractice. Ready? It also appears that the defendant attended the plaintiff as his physician until May 29, 1958, at which time the plaintiff was removed to the Westside Hospital at Bay City, where an operation was performed on his arm by making an incision therein and removing therefrom certain pus, that the plaintiff remained at said hospital for about 3 weeks, where he received medical treatments for his arm, and then returned to his home, where he received medical treatment for some time thereafter. As a result of this diseased condition of the arm, a part of the triceps muscle was destroyed, which has caused a permanent partial disability of the arm, and in the treatment thereof the plaintiff has incurred certain doctor bills and hospital bills. The plaintiff in substance claims that the defendant, in making this hypodermic injection into the plaintiff's arm, was negligent in that he failed to use proper antiseptic methods in making said injection, that he failed to properly wash the arm with alcohol or other antiseptic at the point where the injection was made, and that because of this negligence on defendant's part in failing to employ the proper antiseptic methods in making this injection, an infection set in which caused the disability to the plaintiff's arm. For this alleged negligence and resulting injuries, the plaintiff seeks to recover damages from the defendant. The defendant denies that he was negligent, denies that the injuries to plaintiff's arm were caused by any negligence or improper treatment on his part, and alleges and claims that before making the said injection, he washed his hands with soap and water and thereafter with alcohol, and that he washed the arm at the point where the needle was inserted with alcohol, that the methods employed by him were the usual and accepted methods of his profession in such cases, and that whatever injuries the plaintiff did receive to his arm were not caused by any negligence or faulty methods on his part in making said injections, but were wholly due to causes over which he had no control and for which he was in no way to blame. These are in substance the claims of the parties as here presented by their pleadings and evidence. The only claim of negligence in this case is that the defendant failed to employ the usual and approved methods in making the injection of the serum into the plaintiff's arm, that defendant failed to properly sterilize his hands and plaintiff's arm before making the injection. There is no claim that the defendant failed to properly treat or care for plaintiff's arm after the injection was made. There is no claim of negligence in the matter of treatment. The only claim of negligence is as to the method used in making the injection. The burden of proof in this case rests upon the plaintiff to show that the defendant was negligent and that his negligence caused the injuries in question. Before the plaintiff can recover in this case, he must show by the preponderance of the evidence that the defendant was negligent, and a causal connection between such negligence and plaintiff's injuries. It is not enough to show that the defendant was negligent. Before the plaintiff can recover, the evidence must warrant the conclusion that the plaintiff would not have suffered his injuries had the defendant not been guilty of negligence or want of care in making the injection. There must be proof beyond mere conjecture that the negligence charged caused the injuries. You are not permitted to base your verdict on mere guess, conjecture, or speculation, unless you find from the greater weight of the evidence that the defendant was negligent in making the injection, and unless you further find that such negligence caused the injury to plaintiff's arm, your verdict must be for the defendant. The fact that the results are bad raises no presumption of negligence. Negligence is not presumed from results. When a doctor accepts professional employment, he is only required to exercise such reasonable care and skill as is usually exercised by doctors in good standing of the same school of practice. There is no testimony in this case from which you can find that any germs or bacteria were transferred from the finger of Dr. Brookshire to the arm of the plaintiff, or that any germs or infection in Dr. Brookshire's finger could have caused plaintiff's injuries. Let's get back to some literary material now, and this is an article called Labor of Love that's written by the NCRA Student Committee. So we'll continue on with that. Ready? While a full-time high-speed student, I also currently work full-time as an e-commerce specialist for a biotech company. It's not easy. My day starts at 3:30 a.m. and I usually work between 8 and 10 hours per day, plus some weekends. For a long time, I was unhappy about this, wishing that I could attend school full-time and not have to work. However, I decided to change my thoughts and think of the good it does for my future as a stenographer. Working at my job has taught me strong work ethics, and I know what it takes to meet crucial deadlines, be professional and punctual, and work well under pressure. I currently deal with end users who have heavy accents, so I'm getting acclimated to the accents I will hear on the job. I've worked closely with government agencies dealing with contracts, government grants, stem cell research, and laboratory instruments. You just never know what will come up in court, captioning, or in a deposition, so the exposure to such a wide variety of fields is invaluable. I decided to look at the bigger picture and remind myself that just because I have to work and bring in a steady income, everything is about timing. There are advantages and disadvantages to working while attending school, but the good news is that as long as you work hard, regardless of what the circumstances may be, it will pay off in the end, and the labor will be well worth it. That was written by Shawnice Day from Oakland, California. Now for some more jury charge practice. And the subject of this jury charge is accident. Ready? Comes now the defendant and the court, having indicated that he will give plaintiff's tendered instruction number 2 to the jury, now objects to the giving of plaintiff's instruction number 2 on each of the following and separate and several grounds. 1. Instructions number 2 is repetitious in that it is the same as plaintiff's instruction number 9. 2. There is no evidence in the case that Alice Sherman was in such a position as to require assistance from the trainmen and employees. The only evidence is that after she was out on the steps, she said, "I can't see." There is no evidence of any breach of duty after that point. 3. The plaintiff's contributory negligence having been established as a matter of law, it is in error to tender the issue to the jury. 4. There is no evidence from which a jury could determine that any negligence on the part of the defendant was the proximate cause of any injury to Alice Sherman. Comes now defendant and objects to the giving of plaintiff's tendered instruction number 5 upon each of the following separate and several grounds. 1. The instruction is erroneous in that it states that contributory negligence is a matter of defense and the burden of proof rests upon the defendant, without stating that in determining the issue, a jury may consider evidence introduced by the plaintiff as well as the defendant. 2. The last portion of the instruction states that the defendant has failed to comply with its burden of proof on the issue of contributory negligence if the jury does not find a preponderance of all the evidence that the plaintiff's wife was guilty of negligence. Comes now defendant and objects to the giving of plaintiff's tendered instruction number 6 upon each of the following grounds. 1. There is no duty to keep steam out of the vestibule of its car, nor is there any evidence that the plaintiff's wife was injured by said steam. 2. There is no evidence that there was any weak, broken, or defective condition in the car, and therefore an instruction alleging that the injury was caused by a weak, broken, or defective condition is outside the evidence in this case. 3. The independent intervening act of Alice Sherman in going where she could not see was the proximate cause of her injury. 4. Alice Sherman's injury was not caused by any weak, broken, or defective device, and therefore the doctrine of res ipsa loquitur does not apply. 5. The decision of New York Central versus Peterson is wrong in overruling Wilson over Coleman for the reason that Wilson versus Coleman was a case where the plaintiff proceeded to attempt to prove the defendant guilty of negligence and failed to do so. In Wilson versus Coleman, the court held under the circumstance res ipsa loquitur was out of the case. The opinion of the court in Wilson versus Coleman was erroneous in stating the record in the case because the court stated that where the defendant had come in and proved he had used ordinary care, the doctrine of res ipsa loquitur was out of the case. This was both an incorrect statement of the record and of the law. All right, let's get back to some little literary practice. Ready? While I was in school, I took up a promotions job to help cover expenses. Most of the time, I was the Bud Light girl, doing promotions during sports games at local bars and restaurants. It was a flexible, good-paying job that didn't interfere with daylight school hours or practice time. While it didn't give me much experience for court reporting, it absolutely taught me how to converse with a wide variety of people. Writing well and producing good transcripts is only half of the job. You have to be friendly and able to sell yourself too. Of all the advice I've received about being successful in school, the piece about occasionally stepping away from the machine is one that I take to heart, so I enjoy doing a job that's completely separate from court reporting. Art modeling. What could be further from finger drills and legalese than art? As a part-time gig, art modeling pays well for relatively little effort. The schedule is entirely customizable, the audience is always interesting, and the work is very satisfying. You're creating art right along with the artist without even picking up a brush. As separate and apart as it seems, however, I've still managed to find some tie-ins to court reporting. Art models find work either through guilds, I think firms, or through word of mouth, think freelance reporters. The job still demands professionalism, timeliness, and a willingness to adapt to your client's needs and your product poses in what speaks for you. Once you've developed a good rapport with the artist or group, they will ask you back by name. And once you've worked for a variety of clients, you'll learn to be more discerning of where you spend your time and energy based on a group's rates, method and speed of payment, and tendency to leave good tips. When my daily schedule consists almost exclusively of court reporting, I appreciate the reminder that there is a world out there that is just as beautiful and deserving of celebration as court reporting. For as long as there has been court reporting school, there have been students working their way through school. So if you're finding yourself in a position where you need to bring in additional income as a student, know that many others have come before you and many more will come after. It always helps to hear what other students have done in your same situation. But know that whatever decision you make will ultimately be the right one for you. Just remember that we'll all be at the finish line together, welcoming you into your new career. Very nice. Let's get back to some more jury charge about the accident. Ready? New York Central versus Peterson was correct in disproving the erroneous language in Wilson versus Coleman, but was wrong in attempting to overrule the doctrine of law stated in the case. As applied to the Sherman case, Alice testified that there was a broken steam coupling. She was not injured by any escaping steam, nor has there been any contention made that Alice Sherman suffered any steam burns. Her injury was caused by a fall when she went from a place of safety into a place where she could not see. There is no evidence, nor is there any allegation in plaintiff's complaint of there being a defective step which she stated she did not step upon. Therefore, the doctrine of res ipsa loquitur does not apply. Comes now defendant and objects to the giving of plaintiff's instruction number 8 for the reason that there is no evidence that the plaintiff's wife will require any medical treatment. The only evidence on future expenses is evidence that in the future she will need some more chiropractic adjustments. There is a difference between medical treatment and a chiropractic adjustment. Plaintiff is entitled to allege as part of his damages that he will need future chiropractic adjustments to introduce evidence on the subject and to recover a verdict on that basis. but where a complaint alleges that he has spent money for medical care and attention, and in the future will be compelled to expend additional sums for such purpose, plaintiff is not permitted to recover the future chiropractic adjustments. Comes now defendant and objects to the giving of plaintiff's instruction number 9 for the reason that there is no evidence that the defendant failed to exercise ordinary care for the safety of Alice Sherman, nor that the defendant was guilty of any negligence which proximately resulted in injury to said Alice Sherman. The instruction is erroneous in that the evidence in the case shows the application of last clear chance in reverse, in that any alleged negligence on the part of the defendant had started and was continuing while Alice Sherman was in a position of safety, and that Alice Sherman had the last clear chance for avoiding her injury by staying where she was. This she failed to do, in that she went where she could not see and fell. And that will conclude our literary and jury charge practice.